the reason I have the confidence to do these big deals is because I did the small deals. So like my first property I ever bought gave me the confidence to buy the second and the third. My first seller finance deal gave me the confidence to do the next and the next and the next.
All right, welcome to Quest for Keys, where we highlight the key moments in entrepreneurs' lives that unlock doors on their path to success. I'm your host, Hohen Tai, and joining me is our ever-inspiring Alvin Wee. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking to Gabe Hamill, the author of 0 to 100 Units, Build a Cash Flow Real Estate Portfolio of over 100 units, Achieve Time Freedom, the New Currency of the Rich, and do it under 3 years. He's also a military man and has been deployed to Iraq. So thank you for your service. And in his almost 20 years of investing, he has amassed a portfolio over $60 million, consisting of single family, multifamily, mobile home park, triple net lease, commercial. He's done it all. Guys, please help me welcome Mr. Gabe Hamill.
Hey, thanks guys. Appreciate the kind introduction.
Damn, dude. How do you beat that intro, man? I think that's a very powerful intro that we've ever had.
That was a nice intro. I'm like, gosh, this made me sound good. I hope I live up to the expectation.
You do, man. Look, like, I just want to kind of say this. Like the first time I met Gabe, I was really impressed by him because of how humble he was, and also I love the fact that he's always wearing black shirts.
I do usually. I usually have a black T-shirt on. I'd say 95% of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're like twins, man. When I first saw him, I'm like, dude, look at this guy. He's always wearing black. And the more I got to know him, the more I realized like we have so much in common, and I'm like, I love this guy. Like he's going to be a great guy. And I'm so glad we've become really good friends, man. And the last event that we were in, was the 50, but even before that, we got to travel together, man. You want to break that down a little bit, what that's all about?
That's true. Yeah. Last April, we were on a private island together that we rented out the entire island with a bunch of friends and our wives. And that was pretty amazing. It was a little private island, Islas Secas in Panama. That was pretty amazing. Yeah. Alvin, you and I have got to spend a decent amount of time together. We kind of run in a lot of the same circles. So yeah, definitely fortunate and honored to call you a friend.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed about Gabe right away was like, man, this guy's super jacked. I'm like, I wonder what kind of diet he has, and all of a sudden, like, I found out he's vegan. I'm like, I've never really met a vegan before that's like super jacked before. So, I just, before we go into the financial stuff and all the real estate stuff, like, this is a very, very interesting topic for me because I'm on the path of like trying to be healthier. Like, can you break that down for me? Like, what got you towards being vegan, and have you always been like that? And I just want to hear like the story behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been strictly vegan for 20 years. I'm not the guy anymore that says, oh, everybody has to do this. I think it's like when I was younger and excited about something, like when I was first vegan, I'm like, everyone needs to be vegan, right? Same thing like when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and started investing in real estate, I'm like, how does anybody have a job? Like everybody should quit their jobs and invest in real estate. Like I don't necessarily think that anymore, but like in those early years, it was like, if I'm doing it, everyone should be doing it. Now it's more like, hey, it works for me. Like I chose to go vegan. My grandfather, who I never met, died of a heart attack, heart disease. My dad eventually as well about 6 years ago, and his brother. And I had read an article years ago, a little over 20 years ago, about a guy that reversed colon cancer by going vegan, size of a softball, was afraid of doing chemo and radiation. And he went vegan. And in less than a year, no medicine, no chemo, no radiation, cancer's gone. And I thought, that's a cool story, but it's one guy. Plus, he was selling like a greens drink. So I'm like, he's kind of got a bias and a great story. But the more I looked into it, I saw people were reversing a lot of illnesses through, going plant-based. And I really don't like a lot of the processed stuff. And, but yeah, I've been eating strictly vegan for 20 years. I feel great. I don't know that it's for everybody, but I thrive on that diet. And for me, it's a longevity play and to break that cycle of heart disease. There's a lot of evidence of people reversing heart disease by going vegan. So that's the short story.
Man, that's incredible, man. Like I've tried being vegan before. And I'm like, man, this is really hard. And one thing I noticed about Gabe is like, the first time that really impressed me is went to an event and he was carrying like a basket full of food and fruits, and I'm like, whoa, this guy's super committed. I'm like, I was totally impressed. And every time I'm like eating, I'm like, okay, I need to eat a little healthier because I'm around this guy. So just proximity, guys. Just around guys like Gabe and Hone just changes everything for you because you become the average of the five people that you hang out with usually, and that's important of being belonging in a group. And we're just kind of talking about that a little earlier with Gabe. Gabe and I belong to a mastermind called Go Abundance. That's how I know him and Hone. And we also joined the 50 together, which is with Brandon Turner. And it's just impactful to be surrounded by really high level performers like Gabe. So, man, thank you for being on the show, man. I'm super excited about this because you are probably the epitome of what this show's about. This show is about our journey from everything from our health, wealth, and also our relationships. And, I can't wait to kind of dive right in. I know, Hone, you got some questions for him, right?
Of course, of course. I mean, like, well, first, I want to say, like, success leaves clues, and Gabe is like the definition of success. He's wealthy, he's healthy, he's got a family, all the things, right? He's got everything. He's like the poster child of what you should be. And so now we're all just trying to strive to that. So that's pretty
Now
cool.
I'm
So
blushing.
yes. No, it is really cool. And the fact that you are so committed, I mean, in a world where people are so wishy-washy about everything, it's nice to see that there are people who are like marching to the beat of their own drum and they're a leader, whether people are following them or not. They're just like, this is what I'm doing and I have goals that I want to achieve. And so thanks for being that pillar, that light for us to like have direction. So that's really great. Um, so I was binging the information about you for the last couple of days, just like trying to learn who you are and what it is that you do. So instead of going into that, because everybody can do what I did, what would you like to share that you're excited about now moving forward from today forward? Not what you've done, but what do you plan on doing? What's your 5 year, 10 year? Do you have visions like that? Do you make plans like that?
Yeah, I like that question because everybody wants the backstory, and I'm fine sharing the backstory. But yeah, like where I'm going, I want to create a life for myself, a life of fulfillment. I've built my life to have a life of freedom and to have my own choices. That's why I got on the real estate investing journey. It wasn't about the money. It was about the freedom of time, spending time with my family, spending time traveling, spending time just doing what I want. Um, I have a vision for, the next 5-10 years. I'm not the guy that writes down every single detail and looks at it every single morning. But I get something in my mind and kind of more of a picture and I focus on that. I think part of that is I'm really clear on the handful of things that are really important to me. And that being, as you guys already touched on, it's my family, it's my health, it's my freedom to move around this world freely. It's being able to build wealth through real estate that does not take up a ton of my time. And I'm really clear on those couple things, which makes it really easy to say yes to the things that align with those couple things and no to things that don't. And I think going forward, I just want to continue to always become a better version of myself. Like, I heard someone say once that if you're not slightly embarrassed by who you were 10 years ago, you're probably not growing. And I think about that sometimes because I'm like, what am I doing today that 10 years from now, I might look back and maybe I don't like the word embarrassed, but like, if I haven't changed in 10 years, like that means there hasn't been growth. So I don't know what 5 or 10 years might look like. I just want to be a better version of myself in every area, whether that's a better husband, a better investor, just a better human.
So I'll do that. What would you be embarrassed by that you're doing today, 10 years from now? What do you
Oh,
think?
shit. I don't know. I don't know because I don't know. I'm trying to live my best life now. I'm trying to grow in all areas. So it's hard to answer. I'm not sure.
Okay, so you've amassed a $60 million portfolio, right? And so you have tons of passive income. You're in the 50. That's not a cheap thing to be in. Like you're spending money, but you got a lot coming in. You have all the free time. Would you say you have enough?
Yes and no. Like, I think it's a balance of the thing that brings me the most happiness is gratitude. And like, I don't know if it comes natural or it's just something that I've learned through the years. I am very grateful for all the things in my life, and like the simple things, like I might wake up and turn the water on and I'm like, this is fucking amazing. There's just like fresh water that I can drink, like all the little things. Like, I have so much gratitude for not only the big things, but all the little things. And that's probably the biggest contributor to my happiness. And so, yes, I'm grateful for where I'm at, but I also want to grow. There's a part of me that feels like if I'm not growing, I'm dying. And that's in all areas, including building wealth. Building wealth through real estate for me is just another way to measure success, not so much financially, but it's very mentally stimulating. Like, I enjoy doing it. And until it becomes unenjoyable, I'm going to keep doing it, because I've been asked that before. When is enough enough? Well, I think enough is when it becomes unenjoyable and I don't want to do it anymore. But at this point, like, if I'm not building something, I feel like a little part of me is dying. So, whether that 60 million real estate portfolio becomes 200 million, I don't have this number. I feel grateful for where I'm at. I enjoy my life. It's kind of the same, like, when I've gotten asked about like bucket list items, things that I want to do, it's kind of twofold. Like, there is literally nothing I feel like I need to do before I die. And at the same time, I want to do it all, right? Like, I don't have these, like, I have to go to this place, but maybe I get invited somewhere really cool that I've never heard of. And I'm like, I want to go there. Yeah, let's do that. Right. And so it's kind of this mix of, there's nothing I need to do, and I kind of want to experience life to the fullest.
Do you consider yourself a very spontaneous guy?
Spontaneous, yes, if it's the right thing, right? But again, it goes back to that clarity of like, I'll say no to things that take me away from the things that are important. Like right now, I'm in a period of my time. Well, my family's always important, right? But my kids, they're 14 and 16. So like, it's becoming more real that they're not that far away from adulthood. So I'm saying no to a lot more events that I used to go to, because it's actually more important to me to just be here. Now, I'm not saying no to all the events because it fills a bucket. It's important to me to get around, my people outside of my family and those masterminds that we talked about. But at the same time, I don't need to go to every event. I don't need to be gone every single month learning about, basic real estate stuff, but some of the high level stuff, yes. So again, it's saying no to certain things, but also saying yes to things, even if that's a spontaneous thing, if it aligns with what's important.
So if you're trying to grow, let's say financially, and you have a $60 million portfolio now, maybe it goes to 200 million. Do you foresee just doing more of what you have, maybe adding more mobile homes, maybe adding more commercial property, maybe adding more multifamily, or do you see yourself adding a new asset class into the bucket, right? Maybe you're doing notes at a large scale. You're buying like tapes of notes or something like that. Like, how do you see your portfolio growing and you being mentally stimulated at the same time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really think for me, there's periods of times where it's, learn as much as possible, take action. And within the different asset classes I've been involved in, I like to say I typically micro focus. So like when I was buying mobile home parks, I completely turned off, looking at even a single family or a small multifamily property. The focus, it was very mobile home parks only. And that served me really well. And I think going forward, it's more so, there were periods of time where it's buy as much real estate as possible. I think the focus going forward is actually buying less real estate, but larger, more financially impactful real estate. Some of my best deals have been large commercial properties, and it's not so much about the unit count anymore, right? I think there's a vanity metric to that. There's also value to that, like at the end of the day, you buy real estate, you own assets, like long-term real estate wins. I mean, I very much believe that. I'm always in a better position financially because I own real estate. But I think going forward, I really, I started selling off some of my smaller stuff. I want to move some of that money, some of that wealth into larger, more financially impactful real estate deals. So I don't need to necessarily do a ton of volume, but just bigger and smarter deals.
thing. Like when you're saying, so you're recalibrating right now, correct? And what is your how are you formulating decision making in terms of what you're selling and what you're buying into and what your focus now is? Because I know you're jumping into a lot more commercial stuff versus like the mobile home parks, right?
Yeah, I mean, I take a pretty holistic approach. I mean, I'm not the systematic guy of like, oh, when it hits this metric, it's time to sell, right? Um, but it's a lot of the single family and small multifamilies have served me really well, right? And I've always said I'm a cash flow guy. I've always bought for cash flow, but it's interesting because over time and with forced appreciation and other things, it's actually the equity or the appreciation where a lot of my wealth has been built, but it's the cash flow that's allowed me to hold the property for that period of time. And so it's only been the last couple of years I started looking at my return on equity, and return on equity is, well, I bought this home for the cash flow and maybe, 15 years ago it was cash flowing a few $100s a month, and it's gone up in cash flow every year slowly. But now fast forward 15 years later, and all of a sudden there's hundreds of thousands of equity. Is it better to keep that property, or is it better to sell that property or refinance that property and deploy that capital into something else? Now, that being said, I've never bought a property, or I've rarely bought in a property throughout the 20 years with the intention to sell it. I don't buy properties with the intention to sell it. It's cash flow. How is that property performing today? But when you fast forward a few years or several years, all of a sudden there is an equity play, right? And it's could I do something with the equity in this property? Could I do something with this appreciation that's going to give me a much greater return than I could just keeping that equity, that phantom equity, that just on paper equity tied up in that single family home? And I can give you a really easy example. So a lot of the early stuff I did, no money down deals, right? And I bought this single family home for no money down, and it was a great cash flow property for a lot of years. I sold that property and I did a 1031 into a mobile home park. Now, that money I put down on the mobile home park was no real money out of my pocket, right? Because bought a single family home, no money down. I parlayed that into a mobile home park. Well, that mobile home park appraised out. I paid 1.3 million. It appraised out at 2.775 million 2 years after I bought it. I pulled cash out of that and deployed that into a large triple net commercial deal. So basically a single family home that was 100% financed, but cash flowed, eventually turned into an $8 million commercial property with no real money out of my pocket. Single family, 1031 into a mobile home, mobile home park, force appreciated the mobile home park. Now it's worth a lot more than what I paid for it. Pulled that cash out and redeployed that. It's like money's not real. It's like fake money, right? It's like and I think when you look through it through the lens of like it's not real and it's a game, you can do things like that. It's you're literally going single family, mobile home park, large commercial, no real money out of pocket.
Especially when you start with no money,
Especially when
and
you
this,
start with no money.
yeah, and I know that you're famous. Let's just say you're famous for starting your real estate with zero money. So this is incredible knowledge right there, and now you're just leveraging and pivoting every single way, and you're stacking all that real estate into a massive portfolio now.
I think there's a danger, and I feel extremely, extremely fortunate to have started with no money because it forced me to be creative. Now, a lot of that was, creative seller financing deals and other, creative strategies, but I think it's easier to be stupid with money when you have money. And so I've really tried to make sure that I've taken that forward. I don't think every deal's been a home run, but I also think, kind of like I said at the top of the show, like at the end of the day, owning real estate, especially cash flow in real estate, it wins over the long term. And I think a lot of people are afraid to just pull the trigger and buy something that makes sense. And then in 10 years, they're like, oh shit, I should have bought that property. Rather than, oh, I'm glad I bought that property that just doubled in value and its cash flow for the last 10 years.
So how would you define your purchasing strategy now? Are you still using cash down payments, or I mean, I guess maybe I should say, are you not putting any cash down payments at all?
It really depends. So from like 2009 through 13, it was all seller finance deals. And then from about 2014, 2015 forward, it was a combination of seller financing, private money, hard money, and then converting that into long-term debt later. I like the banks for refinances. I don't love bank terms for purchases always. Although as I've shifted into commercial properties, I found that if the deal's good, banks are willing to actually get somewhat creative. And I have some pretty interesting creative deals that I've done with banks that have been incredible. I think for a period of time, I had this fixed mindset that banks won't be creative. And I do think that's kind of true on some of the smaller stuff. But with the bigger deals, banks actually have the ability to be a little more creative and have some flexibility there.
Let's hear an example, man, because I know you got some really cool deals that kind of just you closed on it recently, right? That were pretty amazing structures.
Yeah, you might be referring to the property I bought in Iowa City. It's an industrial deal, and the financing structure was pretty interesting. So I bought this for 2.9. I think this is the one you're talking about. It was a 2-tenant, 34,000 square foot industrial property, and the bank was willing to go 80% LTV. And the broker was going to carry 10% as a down payment assistance. So 2.9 million, and I was going to bring 300,000 down. Now, keep in mind that 300,000 at some point came out of a cash out refi or maybe something I sold, right? But it's still house money. Everything's house money. So I'm buying this for 2.9. I'm coming in with 10% down. I'm putting 300,000 down. But of the two tenants, one of the tenants was on a 5-year lease. They're the oldest commercial construction company in Iowa City. The other tenant is the largest labeling packaging manufacturer in the world. They do $5.7 billion a year in revenue. And after their 10-year lease, which was up when I bought it, they only do 1-year lease increments, right? And so I thought, hey, there's some risk to that. Well, their largest client is Procter & Gamble, which was 1.5 miles from the property. And I'm like, well, as long as they're a client, they'll probably stay. But how do I mitigate my risk? They could leave after a year. And for these 1-year lease increments, they're paying above market. So if they leave, then I need some reassurance, some guarantee. So I was able to negotiate a $350,000 rent guarantee, meaning if typically that would be escrowed, right? And that $350,000 at closing would typically go into an escrow account. But this deal got even better. So again, purchase price 2.9, I'm bringing in 300,000. And there's a $350,000 rent guarantee. And the bank said, well, I like this property. I like the deal. It's strong cash flow. We don't need the whole 350. And we don't need you to escrow it. We need deposits at our bank. So when I closed this, they actually gave me 150,000 back at closing. So going over it again, 2.9 million, I bring in 300,000 down. They turn around and hand me a check for 150. So now I'm in this deal 5% down. First year cash flow on this is like 100, I think it was 108,000 first year. There's been lease, so it's beyond that now. It's like 120,000 a year, something like that. So I'm in at 5% down. That's a 60% cash on cash year one. Second year they renew, it's a 72% cash on cash deal. But not only did they give me that 150,000 back, so I'm in this deal 5% down, there's still 200,000 left. And the bank said, we don't need that escrowed. We need deposits. So they're like, you can put it in a checking, a savings, or a CD and earn interest. So I put that at the bank that holds the mortgage. They gave me interest on it in a CD, which wasn't a ton, but it was interest. And that's actually getting released back to me because that tenant is about to sign their second lease. And even though corporate doesn't typically let them do more than 1-year lease increments, they signed a 2-year lease, and that $200K is coming back to me this month or this next month. So it's like, I'll be into this deal, no money out of pocket. It's pure cash flow. It's an infinite return on my money. And that was the bank's willingness to be creative because the deal was strong.
Boom.
That was a mouthful.
Sold.
I know.
Man, that's an incredible deal. Are you finding more deals like that, Gabe?
I would like to find more deals like that.
How did you find that one?
So yeah, it's a good question. It was a broker relationship. It was a broker that I had worked with on some other industrial stuff that I had bought in Indiana. And that broker brought me this deal, but more so, not only did she bring me the deal, she had a great relationship with this bank. She had helped other other investors get financing through this particular bank. And this bank, they liked the asset class, they liked the location, and they liked my background. And so it was a perfect combination of the deal was good. And not only was I leveraging the relationship that I already had with the broker, but leveraging her relationship that she already had with the bank. And so it was a win-win for everybody involved, the bank, the broker, and myself.
And you said that the broker actually put up 10% as well?
Yeah, the broker carried 10%. They carried 10%, and it came as like a down payment assistance. Essentially, it came to offset what I would need to bring to the table, because the bank was willing to finance 80% of the loan, but the cash flow was strong enough that the bank was okay with the broker financing 10% of it.
Got it. So you have debt with the broker at 10%, $300 to $290,000 or whatever.
And it's important to note that the bank was fine with that, because, if that's not as close to the bank, it's kind of a gray area that could end not so well. And the bank was fine with it because the property supported not only the 80% loan that they had, but also supported the 10% with them carrying and met their DSCR.
DSCR, right? So was the broker the owner as well? And is that typical?
I wouldn't say that's typical. The seller, it was actually a sell leaseback. The seller was actually the commercial construction company. They had actually built that property in, I think, 1998. And, so they locked themselves into that 5-year lease and then sold the property to kind of recapitalize for their business.
And did you ask the broker to hold a second, or did the broker offer?
Kind of both. I mean, it's something we had discussed prior to this deal.
Got it. And what kind of terms did you give that broker?
I think 4% interest.
Oh, like the deal gets better and better. The more you talk, It's like, what? I'm sold. This is fantastic. You did touch upon something that I actually wanted to dive deeper into. You had mentioned that when you did the mobile home park investments, you decided to shut out everything else. You were hyper focused. You were just like just blinders on, right? Just, I'm going to go all in on this. What caused you to make that decision? And then was there a little bit of a struggle? Because a person like you who's in real estate and has been for the last 20 years, I'm sure things came your way in that focus period. So what was your mindset like? What were your thoughts like? How did you accomplish that? And what were the results of that?
Yeah, I love the question, because I can remember like the day that I was like, I need to shut this off, because I do have a lot of deal flow, and I'm on a lot of, email lists and different things that I intentionally got on, from the years of just networking. Right. And the day that I was like, you know what, because I was getting distracted. Like leading up to that, I was distracted. I'm looking at like every asset class, and I think it's fine, especially for people getting started. Like, you just don't know. Like, I don't think one asset class is better than the other. People are kicking ass in every asset class. And I think it's okay to, kind of look at them all until you decide what you want to invest in. And maybe that shifts. But when I decided I need to just not look at anything else, I had so many single family and multifamily deals come into my mailbox like that week. It was almost like the universe was testing me to say, are you really going to do what you just told yourself you're going to do and shut this off? So I remember I was like, I'm done. I'm done looking at single family. I'm done looking at small multifamily, only mobile home parks. And I checked my email on that morning, and I had, like, I swear, more single family and small multifamily deals in my inbox than I normally do. And I thought for about 3 seconds, and I'm like, nope, delete. Didn't even look at them. Right. Because I had to shift my mind to like, if I'm going to focus on mobile home parks, then I need to focus on mobile home parks. And then what happened is I ended up going out and buying, 8, 9 mobile home parks over the next couple of years, because that's where my focus was. And I think it's fine to micro focus. Like, for a period of time, that 09 through 13 period, when I bought all those seller finance deals, I was buying mostly small multifamily in this very specific neighborhood. So that was my focus. So what did I end up buying? Small multifamilies in that specific neighborhood. That's where my mind focused. That's where my energy went. That's where my, the conversations went. And it was the same thing with the mobile home park space. As soon as I shut that off and I let my mind focus on mobile home parks, well, the result was buying mobile home parks.
So now that you're shifting into commercial real estate, I think your warehouses and flex spaces and things like that, or industrial, are you then shutting down all the other asset classes?
Am I what?
Are you shutting down looking at all the other asset classes since you're getting to the triple net game?
Mostly yes. Like if I'm going to do a deal, I do want it to be a larger, more impactful deal. I still have, about 450 residential units between the mobile home parks and some of the multifamily stuff I have, but they're all professionally managed by property management. And so it doesn't take up a lot of my time. I have conversations with my property managers a lot of times through text. It's just like a quick question, a one-off here and there. And then sometimes, we'll jump on for like a longer, maybe 30-minute conversation, but I'm not actively looking at those types of properties anymore. If I do sell properties, I've sold a couple properties, I want to redeploy that capital into those larger deals. So I'm mostly just looking at those larger deals.
And are you always doing a 1031?
I'm not always doing a 1031. I've done a lot of 1031s. I don't like being up against the clock of a 1031, but I also think, there's other ways to avoid that capital gain. I have, I've done some cost seg studies, and in 2022, it was still 100% bonus depreciation, right? And so I did 8 cost seg studies in 2022, 5 on industrial properties and 3 mobile home parks, and then another industrial deal in 2023. So that depreciation, like for your listeners, that could be a whole show in and of itself, but like that carries over. So I have paper losses to offset those gains, and partly because I don't want to be forced to do a 1031. The 1031s I've done, they've been good deals. And a lot of those were, 10 years ago or, around that time where there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to exchange into. Today, when I sell something, I can cash out, not be taxed on it. Now it'll start eating away at that bonus depreciation, but I have a lot of it to carry forward. And I don't want to put myself into a position to be up against that clock or forced to buy a property. I've watched a lot of people buy bad deals just because they have 1031 money.
Oh, it definitely makes sense. So your focus now, industrial properties, how would you, if you were to describe how you go about finding these deals, is it purely broker? Is there off-market things? Do you do any kind of marketing, outreach, direct-to-seller stuff? Like what's your pipeline look like now?
Yeah, every deal I've ever done, from my first deal to my most recent deal, it's all been relationships. And some of that's broker relationships. A lot of that is just being willing to tell people what I'm looking for. I've never been shy saying, hey, these are the types of properties I'm looking for. So a lot of it's very organic. I don't do any of the ringless voicemail, or I don't send mailers. I don't market or advertise or anything like that. It's been 100% just organic, like old school relationships. All my lender relationships, all my broker and agent relationships is just genuinely like organic networking and telling people what I'm looking for. And I think sometimes people think you have to have like this hundreds and hundreds of these amazing relationships. I like people. I like building relationships, whether it's business or not. But a lot of times it's only a couple people, right? It's a couple good brokers. It's a couple good lenders. It's a couple good sellers that want to carry financing for you, that own multiple properties and they want to sell you their next property. Like it doesn't have to be, I definitely don't want like 200 superficial relationships with brokers. I'd rather have a couple close brokers that understand my investment philosophy, what I'm looking for, and can feed me some good deals when they come their way.
And how did you develop these broker relationships? And I know that you're buying nationally right now. You're kind of all over the place, right? When it comes to buying real estate. So how do you find these brokers, and how did you develop those relationships?
Yeah, initially, I've just done some just kind of random things. Like when I think about like when I was started to buy mobile home parks, I wanted to learn about mobile home parks. So I got on LoopNet, not because I thought LoopNet was the best place to go to buy mobile home parks, but to give you an example, I went on there, looked up every mobile home park listing across the country. Now, most of my mobile home parks, all of them are in the Pacific Northwest, but I didn't know if I was going to be buying somewhat locally, regionally, or nationwide with the mobile home park. So when I shifted in that space, I got on LoopNet and looked up every mobile home park listing. And it gave me two things. For one, a lot of times the financials were available. So I really learned how to analyze mobile home parks, but it also showed me who all the mobile home park brokers were. And then within that, you get on a lot of these lists or you have some conversations. And I think you for me, kind of naturally, I kind of feel out like who my people are, like who understands what I'm looking for, who am I likely going to work with, who just has the personality that I would want to have a phone conversation or text back and forth with. For me, it's a little bit of a, judge of character. Not that the other brokers aren't good people, but you just kind of find who makes sense to work with. And for me, it's just kind of been more of a natural flow than anything. It doesn't, I wish I could say, oh, this is the system I use and go do this. And this is how you find the people. But for me, it's just been very organic.
So it's really good to hear that, you don't have quite a robust system like everybody else, because it's challenging in this type of environment right now to find a deal. But to hear someone like you who doesn't really have so much of a formulated system or a formula and things like that, it's quite a...
I think people overcomplicate it, right? Like here's a good example. Like my buddy Ryan Murdoch, he's a partner at Open Door Capital, and he, is pretty invested. I mean, now he's just traveling in his van, like true time freedom guy, right? But he was in the mobile home park space for a lot of his time, a long time, and still is, being that he's, an owner in Open Door Capital. But he's a good friend of mine. And so I was looking to refinance my first 4 mobile home parks. And so it's as simple as like, oh, this is my good buddy. He's in the mobile home park space. Hey, Ryan, what bank or what broker do you know that, finances mobile home park? He's like, oh, this is my guy. Call him, right? Well, that became a broker who I used to refinance my first 4 mobile home parks. And he's someone that I stayed in contact with. He's someone that like we talk on the semi-regular, and it was just me asking someone in the space who they use. And that created a relationship that was super beneficial. Like I refinanced those first 4 parks. He made money. I got good loan terms. Like everybody wins. I think people tend to overcomplicate it, right? So now when I'm looking to refi a mobile home park, or even, possibly some of my mid-size multifamily properties, I'm calling this guy. Why? Because he performed, and because he was recommended by a friend of mine who's in the business, right? So it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. You build your network, and you ask those people in the network, hey, I'm doing this. Who do you know? Who should I connect with? Like, to me, that's way, way easier and way better than getting on Google and going, who are the mobile home park lenders? Like, you get a list of like 5,000, right? Like, who do you know?
When it comes to like actually finding a mobile home park or an industrial property, either asset class that you want to talk about, what are some of the key things that you are looking for? So like if somebody's listening to this podcast and they're just like, wow, I'm really inspired by this guy, I want to get into those spaces, what is it that you look for? What are some key metrics or something that makes a property really stand out, that lets you know that that's a deal for you?
Yeah, I think specifically with those 2 asset classes, I mean, keep in mind, mobile home parks are very different than triple net industrial, right? Like a lot of my mobile home park tenants, they're paying $500 a month in space rent. And I have an industrial tenant that pays, $52,000 a month in rent. So 500 over 50,000, like it's a very different tenant, but they both serve a need, right? I think in the mobile home, so I'll kind of talk about them separately. In the mobile home park space, it was all about hidden potential. Like, is it under rented? Is there deferred maintenance? Is, little things like the first park I bought, rent hadn't been increased in 4.5 years. Utilities weren't being billed back. Market rents should have been much higher, right? And so within 6 months, it cost me nothing to do a small rent increase, still keeping the tenants below market, and then doing a utility bill back. It added 30,000 to the NOI without spending any money, right? And so I think every asset class is crowded. I think, brokers misrepresent every asset. This is a great deal, whether it's a single family and they're like, this is a great investment. And you're like, no, it's a cute house with a nice front porch. It doesn't make it a good investment. I think commercial is the same, like, oh, this is so great. And you're like, this is empty and nobody's paying rent. Like, oh, but they could. And it's like, well, it's speculative, right? And so I do think in general, every asset class is crowded and most brokers and agents aren't investors. So they're looking at it through a very different lens. But when it comes to the mobile home park space, I want the property, no matter how I finance it, whether it's seller financing, private money, however I finance the property, I want it to cash flow from day one. So that mitigates my risk. But then I look at upside. I never bank on the upside, right? Do I think I can get rents higher? Yes. Do I think that it's poorly managed and I can get better property management in place? Yes. Utilities aren't being billed back. Like those are the easy ones for me in the mobile home park space. Low rent, bad property management, and no bill backs. Because you can increase a ton of value without spending a ton of money. The industrial or the triple net space is very different because it relies heavily on how strong the tenant is. Who's the tenant? Are their finances good? Are there, and then also how strong is their lease, right? The first industrial deal I did, there was 2 years left on the lease and they had been there a while, but I'm like, I don't want 140,000 square feet of empty industrial in Indiana. Like I'm not comfortable with 2 years left on the lease. And so I negotiated, but their finances were good. So I negotiated a 7-year lease, right? So when I closed on that deal, those tenants are there for 7 years with rent increase, already in their lease prior to me closing. And so again, in the mobile home park space, it's, low rent, no utility bill back, bad property management. In the triple net industrial space, or really the triple net space in general, it's really heavy for me on how strong are the tenants and their finances and how strong are the leases.
And then from a return profile, would you say that the mobile home park exceeds the triple net lease tenant by a lot? Like it would seem that way.
Yeah.
Right. The commercial is like a bond almost. You're parking money there.
It really depends. I actually like that question. It's like a simple question, but I don't think it's a simple answer because it kind of goes to like which one's better. I don't know because like that first park I bought, it was 43 units, right? So a small rent increase wasn't a huge impact to the tenants, nor was a utility bill back, especially when their rents hadn't been increased in 4.5 years. But with commercial, a lot of times these 3% rent increments, like they're pretty big. Like when you have a tenant paying $600,000 a year, a 3% increase is fairly significant. And so, when you're looking at commercial properties, remember the value is based on the NOI. And so unlike single family and small multifamily, where the focus is really what are the comps or what is someone emotionally willing to pay for the property, commercial property is based on the NOI. So I don't care if I increase the NOI by these small rent bumps throughout, slowly in the mobile home park space, but because it's 40, 50 tenants, whatever that $50 a month times 50 tenants, that's pretty financially impactful, but so is a 3% increase on a large commercial tenant. If you take a 5-year commercial lease and you add 3% a year, let's say the lease is a 3% increase a year, in 5 years, the value of that property has gone up so significantly based on the NOI because the rent has increased and the expenses fall back on the tenant if it's triple net. And so your expenses haven't got any higher.
But with the raises or like the value add component for the commercial side, that's just the escalation within the leases, right? It's just at 3%. You're typically not like putting a billboard on the side of the building or anything like that. You're not increasing NOI any other way other than what's built into the lease with the
there's ways to do it. That's why it's important to buy. I mean, I don't do this, but I know people that will, they'll buy a commercial property and then they'll add square footage. They'll build on, right? But if you look at between principal pay down and rent increase on commercial property, it can be pretty significant over a pretty short period of time.
Gotcha. And here's a hard question, or maybe not a hard question, but like, say everybody's looking at all of the different asset classes and they're like, all right, commercial triple net sounds great. Would you recommend people starting there? Because most people start single family homes, maybe small multis, whatever, even maybe a mobile home park, but like triple net, is that a place for cash flow? Is that a place that people should start?
I don't like saying this is what people should,
Yeah.
do, partly because I don't think there's one right answer.
We want the Gabe answer.
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked a similar question like, oh, if I were to start again, would I bother with these smaller deals or would I go right to large deals? And I kind of have conflicting answers because there's a part of me that very much is like, oh yeah, why would I do these smaller deals? I'm going to do these big deals. However, the reason I have the confidence to do these big deals is because I did the small deals. So like my first property I ever bought gave me the confidence to buy the second and the third. My first seller finance deal gave me the confidence to do the next and the next and the next. My first 10 unit gave me the confidence to go a little bigger. My first mobile home park deal gave me the confidence and experience to do the next and the next and the next. And then same with commercial. So I'm kind of conflicted because I got the confidence from the experience, right? And they kind of go hand in hand. At the same time, like I know people that have gone and syndicated the 200 unit apartment for their first deal. I know people that went in right into commercial. I would say most people start small, but also most people stay small. So I think it's how big is your vision? Like when I got started, commercial triple net properties, it wasn't even on my radar. It seemed too big, right? Like now I don't believe there's a limit. Like there is no ceiling in real estate investing, right? But in those early years, I was like, man, if I get a property a year for 20 years, that's like 20 properties. Like I am kicking ass, right? And then I have 17 units and I go to my first paid event and I'm like, I just met someone that has 200 units. How the hell they do that? Like, and so it's less tactical and more just like allowing your mind to open up to what is actually possible. I think a lot of people don't let their mind get past just owning one home, or even the smaller investors don't allow their mind to get past owning a duplex, right? But anytime I've allowed my mind to say, oh, this is what I'm going to do. For instance, the first year I bought over a 10 unit place, I'm like, I am buying 10 units or bigger. This is in 2016, I think 15 or 16. I'm like, I'm buying 10 units. And on like December 31st, I bought an 11 unit apartment. Why? Because it's like I allowed, part of that's law of attraction, part of that's law of action. Like I took action on that. I was looking at those, but it's like, why on December 1st? I don't remember if I closed on it or I was in contract December 31st. But yeah, December 31st, why did I end up with 11 units? Because I was focused on it, right? Like I also allowed my mind to open up that I could buy something 10 units or bigger. And, I think that's a big part of it is mindset and then actually taking action on the thing you want.
I think going back to the thing that we were talking about with the embarrassment 10 years from now, I think the most embarrassing thing is the mindset. So imagine yourself when you said, I'll buy one property a year for 20 years. Like that's embarrassing for who you are today. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe that's how I thought. So like you're 10 years from now looking at you going, thinking like, oh, look at these triple net 3% raises. Like maybe that could be the embarrassing thing, even though you're like, yeah, 3% of $600,000 is significant. Like that could be the embarrassment.
Yeah,
like I can't believe I thought that was the, yeah.
I think you're right. It very well could be because, going back to when I had, 2 properties, I'm like, oh, in 20 years, I'll have 20 units. Like that seemed big. That seemed like a big deal. That seemed hard to do, but now it's like 20 units in 20 years. That's light work.
All right.
That's
now
the weekend.
Oh, so we're going to shift gear a little bit. So, with this amount of wealth and assets that you built up, right? I know you have children, right? Is there a succession plan? Are you like any parenting tips? Like what are you doing differently to kind of, I guess, get your kids ready to be shepherds of wealth, or even if that's a plan, I want to hear about this.
Yeah, I love the question because I know you have kids similar ages, and it's something. I mean, I'll be very open and honest about it. Like I have always shared openly my finances with them. Like now they were too young to remember when we were like poor, right? And young, and I shouldn't say poor, but like broke, right? Like literally, like the story I always share is I found like a free box, and it had dishes in it. And those were our dishes. Like when the kids were little, like, because I was financially free when I was only cash flowing $1,500 a month. So I was free, but it's not like I had a ton of money, not like we were living this lavish life early on. The kids were pretty young to remember that, but they know about that. At the same time, I feel like I'm doing a disservice by not teaching them how to build wealth. But it's never been a sit down, hey kids, we're going to learn, the rich dad, poor dad lessons. Hey, we're going to learn about this. I've just always openly talked about, what cash flow is, what appreciation is. I'm not shy about net worth. If I buy a property, I'll tell them, I'll tell them how much I bought it for. I'm happy to share with them the cash flow. If I've had challenges with properties, I'm happy to share the challenges with it. And so it's been again, it's not this like sit down, learn about real estate. It's just always been an open conversation in our house. And it's not just finances. We just have a very open family in that sense. Like we just share, like we share what's on our minds, almost to a fault, but I think it's more good than bad. And I want my kids to have that education regardless of what they do with that. Like they don't have to be passionate about real estate investing. I don't care if they are passionate or not passionate about real estate investing, but I do want them to be financially responsible and at least have a financial education. The school system isn't going to give them a financial education. Society's probably not going to give them a financial education. And so if I can pass that down, I want to be able to pass that down to them. As far as like succession or what that looks like, it's a challenge in my mind. I put off, for so long setting up any kind of succession or trust or plan because I didn't know what that looked like. I was like, I don't want, these spoiled trust fund kids. I don't want to just say, hey, I've worked for all this, here you go. But I think a plan is better than no plan. And so, I think the easiest plan is to stay alive as long as you possibly can. How to responsibly pass that down, I'm constantly thinking about it, right? And I think, anywhere from I've read the book, Die with Zero to, and I have friends that are like, I want to give it all to my kids, and I have friends that are like, I'm giving nothing to them. They get nothing. They have to figure it out, right? I'm kind of in between. I don't want spoiled kids that just have everything handed to them, but I want to help them. I want to invest beside them, and they're at an age, they're 14 and 16. So as they become adults, I think a lot of this I'll gain more clarity on.
Are they open to learning from you right now, or are they resistant? Like, yeah, I just want to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, but again, it's not this like sit down, learn. I mean, I think my kids, they're very different, but it's very interesting because there's been times where like my youngest will be like, oh, I'm going to invest in real estate. Like kind of, I think naturally entrepreneurial, like I'm going to buy a property, I'm going to rent the rooms out. Right. But like my oldest the other day was like, oh, this is a few months back. Like I want to open up a bakery, but I'll probably invest in real estate like dad so that I have the money to do it. And I'm just like, oh, fuck yeah. Because, my oldest, my 16-year-old has been like, I don't care about investing. I don't care about investing. And then like, I hear, oh, I'll probably do what dad does so that I have the financial ability to go pursue a passion of mine. Right. And so that's where it's like, I don't care if it's real estate they pursue or something else, but that they understand like, oh, I could have this cash flow from an asset that allows me to go live the life that I want. Because for me, it's not just that it's not like I'm overly passionate about real estate. I'm actually passionate about life. I'm passionate about freedom and living life on my terms. Real estate allows me to do that. And so, I mean, also a really funny story. When my 16-year-old was 11, wanted me to buy this like gaming computer. And I'm like, I'm not buying that for you right now. Got all mad and was like, I'm going to buy, I probably shared this story with you, Alvin. I don't know. It's like, I'm going to buy my own assets, my own real estate. So I have cash flow so I can buy my own gaming computer. And I'm just like, oh, hell yeah. Like they're listening. Kids are listening. Right. Like, and that's the one that like was like, I don't care about real estate. So I don't know that I answered your question. I think, time will tell. I just want to be a responsible steward of that wealth and do it in a way so that my kids, I want to pass down the knowledge more than the money. And I want my kids to, I think they're good humans. I want them to continue to be good humans as adults. And where the wealth goes or how that gets transferred. I'm still learning and figuring out how I want to do that responsibly.
Charlie Munger actually said, like, you gotta give your kids the money or else they'll be mad at you. It's something to that effect. So it's like, you don't want to because you don't want to spoil them, but you have to because otherwise your relationship is destroyed. And then what was the whole point?
Yeah. And I actually like the idea of doing that while I'm still alive, right? Like I don't know that I agree with everything in Die with Zero, if you guys have read that book, but I like the idea, of being able to share in that or partner on a deal or investing in something, a business or real estate that they're involved in or something that they're interested in. Because, you'd like to think, if we all live to, an good old age, then I would like to think, like, if I live to be 120, I mean, my kids are like in their 80s, like they've probably have made their way, right? Like they're not going to need that at 85, hopefully. Right. And so, we'll see. I mean, I'm making this shit up like all of us. Like we do the best we know how until we know better, and we learn and we grow and we get more clarity. And
bro, that's all parenting is.
Yes.
You make it all up as it goes. You've never had kids before. You're just making it up.
Exactly.
We're just winging it, man. We're just winging it.
I say
I'm
that
sure we'll
all
have more
the-
discussions about this, Gabe, on our next event.
I say it all the time. I'm like, we're just making it up like every other parent until, and some things work, some things don't. Or sometimes they work for a while and then they don't, and vice versa.
It's funny because when we were kids, we looked at our parents like, dude, you're the parent. Like, shouldn't you have the answers? And now that we're the parents, it's like, no, they didn't have any answers.
Yeah.
They didn't even have Google.
Yeah. My parents,
at least
they were making it up too.
Yeah. All right, cool. So we want to switch one more time to the last part. It's called the triad of success. And on the show, we believe that true success is built upon three essential pillars: health, wealth, and relationships, right? And mastering these areas is key to leading a fulfilling life, which is what I think we are all after. So what we want to know from you is, what key insights or philosophies have you developed in your journey regarding health, wealth, and relationships?
Health, wealth, and relationships. I'll go in that order. For health, I think it's consistency and effort every single time, whether it's consistency with working out or with the way you eat, just to have non-negotiables, right? Like, people will say showing up is the hardest part, showing up to the gym. It's absolute bullshit. Like, showing up actually does nothing. It's the work you put in. I also don't think consistency in and of itself does anything without the effort. And so with health, whether it's, working out and eating well, it's consistency and effort. As far as building wealth, I mean, I would say building wealth, it's a lot of the same. It's consistency and effort, but it's also clarity on the life you want, more so than the amount of money you want. When you're clear on what you want in life, I think it's a lot easier, like genuinely easier, to build the life you want versus this made up number of like, if I have 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000, whatever that dollar amount is, passive income, like that doesn't necessarily create the life you want. So when it comes to wealth, I think it's about clarity. When it comes to relationships, I think it's, I think with relationships in particular, like for me, it's getting honest feedback from my wife, from my kids, and from people close to me that know me, know my family. And, I think naturally, like I think about, I've been with my wife almost 20 years. Right. And I think about, like just getting vulnerable. Like when the kids were little, like we separated for 6 months. And I think it's important to share this because up until that time, I spent no work on the relationship, right? Like we had an okay relationship, but I had never read a book on, marriage or relationships, but I'd read all the Rich Dad books. Right. And so it's time, it's effort, it's energy. Like when I put effort into my relationship, when I actually focused on my relationships, like that relationship blossomed. Like my wife today is my best friend and we enjoy each other. Like we actually choose to be around each other. We like to be around each other. Back when the kids were little and we separated for that short time, like we both thought it was done, but I had to like step back and be like, what do I actually fucking want? And, oh, this makes sense. I keep saying like, relationship's not good, but I'm not putting the work in that I did in other areas of my life. And so I know that's kind of a long answer, but we have an amazing relationship today because I was willing to get real on looking at where I was failing. And once I realized, oh, there's an opportunity to be better, I could choose to take that opportunity and be a better husband. And so now I, consciously think like, how can I be a better father? How can I be a better husband? How can I be a better friend to the people that are in my life? And that creates an opportunity for growth.
I love it. I love it. It's like here's the three things. Have a vision of how you want those three things, and put in energy towards making those three things better. Health, wealth, and relationships.
Seems pretty simple, right? Like I think it can be. I think people tend to overcomplicate stuff. It's like you get clear and then you just go do it.
Yeah, hey, sometimes the simplest things are the most powerful things. So yeah, absolutely. All right, Gabe, you have a book out. How can people buy that book? And also, how can people get in touch with you if you want people to get in touch with you?
Don't get in touch with me. No, I'm just kidding. I like people. So yeah, the 0 to 100 book, it's available at 0 to 100tribe.com, and there's a free digital download at 0 to 100tribe.com. Anyone can go on the website, download the book. You can also purchase a hard copy on Amazon. It's also on Audible. If you want to get in touch with me, Instagram, The Real Gabriel Hamel is, I'm probably most active on Instagram than any other platform.
And then how do people join your community? Because I know you're building a mastermind.
Yeah, we do have the 0 to 100 mastermind. And if you go to 0 to 100tribe.com, there is a link for the mastermind. You can apply on there. It's all on the website.
And what do people learn about in that community? Like what's that all for?
Yeah, the focus of 0 to 100 is really how to build time freedom through cash flow real estate. I think a lot of people focus on financial freedom. Our focus is really how do you build time freedom through cash flow real estate? And a lot of it's geared towards, not our elite members, our paid members of 0 to 100 are not those that are trying to buy just one or two properties, but those that truly want to have time freedom through owning real estate, and they understand the importance of scaling in a way that gives them that. It's not, I think the people that we attract are not those ones that just want to buy a duplex, but are more interested in having financially significant cash flow from their real estate so they can live the life on their terms.
Love it. Love it. It sounds like you said that before, man. That was smooth. Good. That's some good stuff there. All right. Well, another fantastic guest, another fantastic episode. Gabe, thank you so much for dropping all your wisdom, knowledge, and everything else that you've been through and showing us what's possible. And I'm going to imagine that you're going to be very embarrassed by who you are today, 10 years from now.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this in 10 years and find out.
Let's go.
Yeah, love it. All right, guys. See you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.